Hello and welcome to Matt's Automotive Channel. In today's video we're going to be replacing the control arms on the GT500. If you had seen my previous video, you would have seen me put in some new ball joints into the lower control arms on the front of this car. And you saw me do it on the driver's side and everything went perfect, no problem. However, I didn't film me doing the other side since it's basically the same process. And that's where I screwed up. I made a big mistake there and ended up bending part of the control arm where the ball joint goes into it, so I was no longer able to put the retaining clip on it. So I figured, okay, I screwed it up, I'm gonna have to get a whole new control arm. So I ended up buying a new set of control arms and we're gonna be replacing them on both sides. There are some advantages to replacing the whole control arm rather than just a ball joint, because with the new control arm, not only do you get a new ball joint, you also get new bushings as well. All right, so here's a look at what I got. We got some new control arms here. I'm going to do a little bit more than that. I'm also going to put in some new spring isolators on the bottom of the spring and then some new strut mounts on the top. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm getting a creaking noise when turning the wheel back and forth, and I believe the bearings inside this are going bad. And then with this strut mount, you also get a new spring isolator as well. And then here's the noise. When I turn the wheel to left to right, you'll hear this noise coming from the underneath the hood here. And I'm going to take it another step further here. And this car has been lowered by its previous owner, and the camber is a bit off. And so I got some camber bolts that we're going to install. And because of that, we got a gauge here to measure our camber so we can determine how much we need to adjust it. And also, I'm going to do a little bit of an alignment. I have a laser level here that I'm going to use. I haven't done this before, so anyway, we'll give it a try. If it's a success, I'll go ahead and keep it in this video. But anyway, on the control arm, what I had done prior is I didn't have a complete ball joint press set, and I ended up using a socket like this to push the ball joint out, and this has the rubber boot on it still, but anyway, with the rubber boot off, this is about the same diameter as the ball joint here, and it works great so long as you have that centered up. But I got mine off a little bit to the side like that, and when I pushed it out, I actually bent this orifice here that the ball joint fits into. And so when I tried to put the new one in, this was warped and I wasn't able to put the retainer clip back on because one part of it sat lower than the other. So anyway, that control arm is gone. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace it. And of course, with the new control arm, we're going to get some new bushings as well. So this should be better. However, this is a control arm I bought off Rock Auto. And this is, it's not the Ford unit. And I noticed when I got it that this ball joint I'm not going to be able to replace. You'll see that the bottom part of this is actually welded in, so it's not going to be able to be pressed out. However, it does have a hole here for the grease fittings. So once we get it installed, we'll go ahead and put in the grease fitting and grease it up. So hopefully it'll last longer. And here's a look at the new ball joint press kit that I got. So hopefully I won't need to be using sockets anymore. All right, so anyway, before we go ahead and lift the car, I'm going to check the camber on it so we know how much to adjust it once we have it up. You need to actually check the camber with the suspension fully loaded. So anyway, the first thing we need to do is determine, are we on a level surface? And we are for the most part. However, you'll see that this garage floor is just slightly off level. And this camber gauge here, we can adjust using this little knob here. So we're going to zero it out based on this floor. And the way I'm going to do that is put another level on to this, and you'll see that this is off by about the same amount as that. So this is not exactly vertical. So what we'll do is put this up against the side, and then we'll adjust the little knob here until it zeroes out, and that will account for any uneven surface that this car is on. So anyway, I'll go ahead and do that. All right, so we'll just hold this square to this, and then go ahead and zero this out right there. And then when we do the other side, we'll have to do the same thing, only on this side. Okay, now fortunately we have a large enough hole here to just use this magnetic base here and hook it up to the rotor. And then when we observe the camber here, we can see that the camber is negative, looks like 1.75 degrees. So, in the spec on this is negative 0.5 to negative 0.9. So we'll subtract that difference, and then when we get the car up in the air, we'll know, and the camber bolt in, we'll know how much to adjust it. All right, I just went ahead and adjusted on the other side. So now we can take a measurement from this side. And this one is way off. Looks like we are right at about negative 3. All right, now we can remove the cross pin for the lower ball joint. Okay, now just make sure that the wheel's turned all the way to the left, and it will attract the steering rack, and you should be able to get enough room to get in here to the front control arm mount. So we're in there. Now I can remove the rear two bolts. They are a 21 mm. All right, there's just not quite enough wiggle room to get that out. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this outer tie rod here, and then we'll be able to swing it down, and then hopefully we'll get that bolt out. Now we can go ahead and remove the brake pads. Now we can go ahead and remove the brake caliper. And we'll want to suspend or hang the brake caliper from the spring for now, so we don't stress the brake cable. Now let's go ahead and remove the rotor. Now let's go ahead and remove the wheel speed sensor. And let's remove the wheel speed sensor clip to the strut. Since the strut's coming out, we have to disconnect everything from it. Now remove the two bolts to the strut, and then we can pull the knuckle off. Now let's disconnect the brake line from the strut. There we go. Now the only thing we have left is the sway bar end link up here. All right, went ahead and moved the brake and then hung it from the front here to get it out of the way. And now let's try getting the end link off for the sway bar. Sometimes it'll come off just with an impact, and then other times you either have to hold it from the back or from the front here while you turn it off. So we'll give it a shot. Yeah, it's gonna spin on us. Right, sometimes there's a cutout on the back here that you can put a wrench on, not on this particular one. So what we're gonna have to do is hold the big nut on, and then it's already loose. So now we can take this 8 mm and thread it clockwise inward. There we go. Just like so. And then we can just drop that away. All right, there's nothing left hanging on the strut. So the only thing holding it in place now are these 4 13 mm bolts up here. So we'll go ahead and start loosening these and then lower the strut down and out. All right, so the next step is to go ahead and remove this coil spring from the strut. This is probably the most dangerous part of the whole process. And for this, we're going to use these McPherson Strut spring compressors. And basically, we're going to put them on here and then wind them down until we actually have a little bit of play or slack here. And then we'll know that all the tension's off. And then at that point, we can go ahead and remove this top mount strut nut. Okay, now at this point we know it's safe to pull it off. So now we have the spring compressed enough that we can see some play in here. So we know that we've relieved all the tension that's on this top mount. So we can go ahead and pull this nut off and not have to worry. All right, this top nut here is a 21 mm. There we go, that's off. And now the spring's off. All right, let's go ahead and take this spring compressor off. That way we don't have any potential energy stored up if something were to slip or fall. There we go. Now we're totally safe. And now we can go ahead and remove this spring isolator. Now these are on with glue, so I might just have to cut this off. I'll try just pulling this off first. Yeah, you can see all that tacky stuff. They're glued on there. There we go. And we'll go ahead and take some kind of solvent and clean all this glue off before we put the new one on. I ended up using some lighter fluid to get the glue off. It worked pretty well. I'll tell you, that's very good glue. And you can see when we put on the new ones, it's going to have some glue as well. So let's go ahead and put them on. All right, this isolator went on pretty easy. Everything's nice and even there, so we can go ahead and place it back over the strut. And the thing to notice is this little indentation down here. You want to make sure that the end of the spring goes into that little notch. And the same thing with the strut mount up on top. So this little cutout here, I want to make sure that it coincides with the end of the spring there. And the other thing to note here is these are lowering springs, and so we may not need to use the spring compressor actually. I mean, you can see that there's some nuts exposed here at the top. We probably could just push down and put them on. So the lowering springs are easier in that respect. If these were stock springs, this strut mount would be up here another inch or so, and then we definitely have to use the spring compressor. All right, so let's just see if we can get this going here. Pushing down on it a bit. Okay, it's just spinning the whole thing, so we'll have to hold the top and then thread it down. All right, now we have the strut back together. Just verify that the spring is in the right location. The end of it is in that little notch. on the bottom and also on the top. So let's go over here and right there, like so. Now when we put this back in, you'll notice that there's a little notch cut out in the strut mount here on top, and there's a little arrow. This arrow is to face outward from the car, so this direction pointing towards you as you're putting it on. All right, first issue that we're having here is these holes don't line up. You can see that this bushing here needs to get pushed on a little bit more. So hopefully we can just pull this control arm off and then push it on maybe another 1/4 inch or so. All right, if we compare it to the OEM one, the one that came off the car, you can see the spacing right here is a lot less than the spacing right here. So we need to make these two the same. All right, I ran into a little problem with the Moog control arm on the passenger side. I tried to put it in and it wouldn't fit, and it's basically because this bushing here was not pushed on far enough this way. I went ahead and tried it with my press and just couldn't do it. I ended up taking it to a machine shop. They couldn't do it. So, and that was on the this Moog that I got. And so I ended up going to O'Reilly's and picking up this one here, which is precision control arms. And this one's actually a little bit better unit anyway, because it does have the C-clip there, so we'll be able to push these ball joints out later if we need to. And it looks like everything's gonna fit, the spacing's correct. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and install this one. All right, we're gonna put this one up in place. Hopefully this will be a better fit than the Moog. I'm sure it will. It looks correct. Yep, that already looks better. And before with the Moog, I couldn't get these down because this was just too far back. These holes didn't line up when this front bushing was in it. So this looks great. Looks like it's going real easy. Yeah, both of those go in. Everything lines up here in the front. This is not going to be a problem. All right, now these bolts get torqued down to 129 pound-feet. Place the steering knuckle back. And along with the new bolt. All right, and we need to torque this down to 76 pound-feet. However, we need to reinstall this bottom bolt to hold it in place while we do that. And we're gonna leave the top one out for now because we're gonna put the camber bolt into the top slot. There we go. Now we can torque this to 76 pound-feet. All right, now we'll put in the top bolt. We're gonna have to change the orientation of this one once the top one's in, so we'll put it in from the front. So now we're ready for the camber bolt and this little washer here. This little washer has a little nub here on the side. Hopefully you can see that. But anyway, it's opposite of this little tab here. And so what we want to do is add positive camber. So this little piece will be out facing towards us. If it were the other way, we'd be adjusting more towards negative camber, which we already have too much of. So it's going to go this way. All right, I went ahead and changed the orientation of the bottom bolt, put it in there loosely so this will move back and forth. Got the cam bolt into the top here, and I'll just spin the cam bolt a little bit so you can see how much that changes the camber based on its position. So you can see it coming in and out. Now, when we install this little washer here, again, we want the tab, this little tab towards the outside because we want to increase the camber since we have too much negative camber. So we'll go ahead and get this all together loosely, and then we'll torque it down. We'll torque the top one first to spec, and then the bottom one once we get the camber set where we need. All right, so we just want to turn this till it's just a little snug and make sure that this washer here is fully seated. So that little tab is on the inside. And then that way, now we can rotate this, change the camber, and this will stay in place. I apologize. I did leave out one step. Normally what you would do is, first of all, we know the amount of camber that we need to change it by about 1.5. And so what you'd normally do is put in the standard bolt here, and then place your camber tool here, and then zero it out using the nut. And then once this is zeroed, let's see, I'll show you here. Once we get it right there on 0, you know that you have to move it positive camber 1.5 degrees. All right, so we got our bubble there. Now I'm going to go ahead and start turning the camber bolt, and we'll change our camber here. And now I'm going to go about 1.5 degrees positive camber. If it's just too much negative camber to get in the spec, you can also put a camber bolt on the bottom as well, and then use the two in conjunction with one another. However, we should be in the ballpark now, and we can fine tune it later. All right, now we can torque these bolts down to spec. Of course, the factory bolt's going to be 129 pound-feet, but according to the instructions here on the camber bolt, if you have a 14 mm, which is what we got, we should only be torquing it down to about 100 pound-feet. So let's go to 100 pound-feet here. And real important to hold this in place so it doesn't spin on you as you're torquing this down. All right, and then here on the other side, we're going to go to the factory spec, which is 129 pound-feet. There we go. Now we can go ahead and put the tie rod and link back in. And this is going to get torqued down to 41 pound-feet. Now we can put the rotor and brake assembly back on. And these bolts here, they get torqued to 85 pound-feet. Okay, 85 pound-feet. All right, now we can reattach the brake line to the strut. And reattach the little keeper here for the speed sensor, wheel speed sensor. Now we can reattach the wheel speed sensor. Now let's reattach the sway bar end link. Now we can go ahead and replace the brake pads. Make sure that the one with the indicator, wear indicator here, is on the outside. Now before we put the wheel on, let's go ahead and put some grease into the ball joint here. Now we can go ahead and replace the wheel. All right, I just went ahead and started to take this out to give it a test drive, and noticed a lot of tire scrubbing, and so I just pulled it right back in. And then taking a look at the tires here, you can see that that's aimed out a little bit on this side. And then if you go over to this side, you would expect this one to be turned in, but no, it's out as well. So these control arms change the position of the alignment. So I'm going to have to do an alignment before I take it out for a test drive. All right, well, with the wheel alignment so far out, and this video is getting a little long, I think I'm going to call this one quits, and we'll have another video doing the alignment. So anyway, till next video, I'll see you then. Bye-bye. Please remember to like, subscribe, and click that notification bell to be reminded of videos going forward.